but the move that black missed was simply a very crazy move that completely changed the game. Here after rook to d6, white is attacking the rook on d8 and the bishop on d4, and there's also a very nice idea to give a background checkmate. Hey there! Today we're gonna learn about the importance of putting tactical problems to your opponent. Even if you're not playing the best moves in the position, creating complications to your opponents can make them collapse. And to illustrate this idea, I chose a very wild game played by Uzbek Grandmaster Nodirbek Abdusattorov at the Prague Masters, and Abdusattorov won this tournament very convincingly, and this was one of the most spectacular wins. So let's get started with the game here. Abdusattorov playing as white went e4, and after e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, and bishop to c4 we get an Italian game. Black replied with bishop to c5, and here white went for c3, which is a very common idea to play b4 or even b4 as we'll see in the game. Black went knight to f6, putting pressure on the pawn e4. Here Abdusattorov played d3. d4 was also an option, but d3 is a bit more common nowadays. And after d6, here castling is the main move, but Abdusattorov decided to play a sideline and went for b4. Probably Abdusattorov wanted to go for less explored lines in order to create complications as soon as possible. So here after b4, bishop to b6, a4, white is already creating a big threat, a5 would drop the bishop on b6. That's why black went a5, a6 was also an alternative, but a5 is a bit more active, planning to take on b4, and after b5, knight to e7, this is a common maneuver in the Italian. Black wants to bring the knight to the king side after knight to g6. And after knight b to d2, both sides castled. So far we get a very quiet position, knight to g6, and here Abdusattorov started to play a bit more aggressive and went d4, occupying the center. And in this position, Navarra played a move that I don't like a lot, or at least it's a bit risky. Black released the tension and took on d4. Here black would have played something like bishop to g4 or rook to e8, holding the center. But instead he took on d4, and after c takes d4, now I might have ideas to go e5 sooner or later, but Navarro's idea was to follow up with d5, counter-attacking in the center. And after d takes e5 and knight takes d5, black is fighting for the center, but on the other hand, after queen to b3, there's going to be a lot of pressure on this diagonal. So this is going to be a recurring idea in this game, which is also a very typical idea in the Italian game. So here black went c6, holding the knight on d5, rook to e1 makes sense, occupying the e-file. And here black went knight to b4. On one hand it makes sense because the b4 square is weak, but on the other hand black is moving another piece without finishing his development. So here a move like bishop to e6 was in my view a lot more solid. But the idea of knight to b4 is to play something like bishop to f5 and then bring a knight to c2. There's also some pressure on d4, but Abdusattorov simply ignored that and went knight to e4. And in this position black didn't take this pawn on d4, which is pretty much suicidal, because after knight takes and queen takes, this bishop is going to be very powerful and white is going to develop very quickly. So white already has a crushing position. Just to show you a very nice line, after the queen retreats, here rook a to d1 is very strong, but there's also the very nice queen to c3, and there's no way to prevent this idea of taking on g7 giving a checkmate, because the pawn f7 is pinned, so f6 is not possible. So here black would have to delay checkmate with a move like queen to f6, but the game is pretty much over. So instead here black took on b5, and after a takes b5, bishop to f5 makes more sense, developing another piece. And in this position Abdusattorov increased the pressure on f7 by going knight f to g5. So black covered the f7 square with queen to d7, white went bishop to a3, activating the bishop and connecting the rooks, and after rook a to d8, bishop takes and pawn takes. Here we already get a critical position. The position is actually pretty complicated. There are a lot of potential tactics here. Abdusattorov went knight to c5, which is an interesting move, objectively not the best, but a very interesting one. I just want to mention here that white had a very strong move, knight takes f7, and after rook takes, the idea is not to take on f7 quickly, but just keep this very strong pin. And after knight to g5, just increase the pressure against the rook on f7. So for example, if black defends the rook, then white can simply play rook to e5, attacking the bishop and planning to double rooks. For example, after bishop to g6, go rook a to e1, and now rook to e7 is another threat, increasing the pressure against the rook on f7. These positions are just very hard to evaluate, but white is having a winning position here. So taking on f7 was very forcing and very convincing. Knight to c5 is another very interesting move because white is attacking the queen, which is defending f7. If black takes on c5, then after pawn takes, these pawns are very strong. This pawn before is going to fall, so this is great for white. And here black played queen to c7. I just want to mention a very hard move to play here, which is queen takes d4. This was very strong for black, but very difficult to evaluate. And the point is that after knight takes f7, black has this very crazy move, rook to c8, just putting pressure on white's pieces, and white doesn't have any crashing discover check. So here, for example, after knight to d6, we give a check, and we attack the rook, but black can simply move the king, and if white takes on c8, after bishop takes, now this knight is actually trapped on c8, so black is doing fine in these lines. So here we see the practical value. We're going to see this again. Abdusattorov didn't play the best moves. Knight to c5 is even objectively a bad move, but he's putting pressure in very complicated positions and he's going to make his opponent crack. So after queen to c7, white went rook a to c1, and now there's an X-ray attack on the queen. So there's a lot of potential tactics for white here. And black played the best move in the position to keep the game going, so black actually played very well besides missing some strong moves. So here black went knight to f4. Now the point is that now taking on d4 is actually bad, because after bishop takes, rook takes, white gets rook to e8, and after knight to f8, the idea is that white has a very strong discover attack against the queen. For example, after rook takes, king takes is the only move, and then after knight c to e6, we get this triple fork plus a discover attack on the queen. But black found a very interesting resource, creating a trap in the position after knight to f4. Here white took on f7, black went king to h8. If black takes on f7, we get another discover attack. After knight to d3, we attack the queen, and we also have pressure against the knight and the rook, so black's king on c7 is overloaded. But after king to h8, the point is that now playing knight c to e6 looks very tempting, but black had this very nice counterattack, knight to e2, forking the king and the rook, and after rook takes and queen takes, we get a background checkmate. White went queen to f3. Even though white got a pawn, the position is still pretty crazy, because after h6, now black has the idea to capture the bishop on f7 if the knight moves, but Abdusattorov kept on creating complications and he went knight takes b7, attacking the rook and the queen. But here black played this idea of a knight to e2, rook takes would lead to a checkmate, so white has to take with the queen, and after queen takes b7, we still get a very complicated position, because even though white has a few extra pawns, black is attacking the bishop and the knight. And in this crazy position, white had to play something like queen to h5, but again he played a wrong move, but a very aggressive one, which was very hard to refute. So here he went rook to c6, eyeing the bishop, and Navarra correctly took the pawn on d4. The point is that after taking the knight, queen to h5 forces bishop to h7, and after bishop to g6, white is given a checkmate after capturing the bishop on h7. So black correctly captured the pawn on d4, and here white should have continued something like queen to h5, and the position is still very messy. Instead he played king to h1, actually inviting his opponent to go wrong, and here black had a very complicated refutation. Again, taking on g5 is not a good idea. Taking on f7 was played in the game. Just want to mention that here black had a very strong move, which is bishop to h7. Now planning to take on f7, white can try something like queen to e6, but after queen takes f7, knight takes and rook takes, black is doing great here with these two very strong bishops and this very strong pass pawn. And after knight takes h7, here black has this very nice idea of taking the bishop and not the knight, and now this knight is actually trapped, so black is going to end up winning a piece. So here black continued with rook takes f7, and before I show you the rest of the game and how white played a very fantastic move here, let me remind you that I recently launched my complete course about chess tactics that will teach you everything you need to know about chess tactics. You're going to practice all of them, and I'm going to teach you a method to find tactical ideas very quickly in any given position. So if you want to know more about this and take advantage of the offers, check the link in the description. So here after rook takes f7, black was expecting knight takes and after queen takes. Black is doing great in these positions with 2 bishops. But the move that black missed was simply a very crazy move that completely changed the game. Here after rook to d6, white is attacking the rook on d8 and the bishop on d4, and there's also a very nice idea to give a background checkmate. So the main point is that after rook takes d6, we get a checkmate after queen to e8 and queen takes. So even though white has 2 pieces hanging, black cannot defend this idea of a checkmate on the back rank. Another try might be rook f to f8, but after white trades, then queen to e8, we get this very similar checkmate with a queen sacrifice. So Navarra tried rook to c8, which prevents the checkmate, but now black collects a lot of material after knight takes f7, queen takes, and rook takes d4. Now white is an exchange up, white also has an extra pawn, so now it's going to be a fairly easy win. After b3, b6, rook to c2, queen to f3, b2, b7, planning to promote, queen to f8, white simply covered the first rank, and after rook to c5 and queen to b3, planning to either promote or take on b2, Navarra had enough and resigned. So this is a very instructive game because white's play is far from being perfect, but white simply created too many problems to his opponent to solve. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.